set it to something other than 0. Because what happens when customers install networks, they'll leave it at factory default, and you may have crosstalk between networks. Now, there are security keys that are implemented as a way to limit the amount of transmissions coming in. So customer A will never see customer B's data. Everything will be unique with a security key. From an output, from a gateway perspective, you do have the ability to name it. The one thing, especially as it relates, I know you said that 900 is not going to be common other than Australia. You do have the ability to set the output power as it relates to 900 megahertz. Never set at 1 milliwatt. That will actually be going away in the next version of the IO Builder. 1 milliwatt equals 0 dBm, and there is nothing good that can happen from 0 dBm. So like I said, that's really set up for lab type testing on a bench. So typically for the applications that we're seeing, 100 milliwatts is more than enough output power as it relates to 900. On the RTU port, slave ID, the IO modules, the IO gateway has the ability to be set up as a Modbus master or a Modbus slave. If it's set up as a Modbus slave, you're going to be able to set the communication parameters. And lastly, one thing that was not really touched on in the video was the config port mode. You do have the ability to configure it as a Modbus slave or in debug mode. And the video didn't go into a lot of detail on debug. If you've ever worked with a serial protocol analyzer and actually see all the data coming in, the request coming in, that's typically the debug window is going to be in real time. The one drawback from that is, and that's why you're setting it here, is the difference between the debug and Modbus slave. In Modbus slave, you actually have the ability from the gateway to pull the devices in the field and bring back Modbus data. So when you're setting up a network, being able to use this for troubleshooting is key, because you can actually isolate the problems. If you're getting the IO back to the gateway, then the issue is between the gateway and the device it's connected to, whether it's a RTU, PLC, or whatever you have. So typically when I'm setting up a network, I will leave it as Modbus slave so I can pull the network for my communications. You have the ability to save this. I don't recommend saving it simply because you'll always have access to it. So at that point, we've added our gateway. We've, through the wizard setup, have been able to define the communication scheme, the hopping pattern. So any other device that we're going to add is going to pick up and inherit those settings. So I'm going to go back to that top level site, and essentially what I want to build is a network where we're going to have multiple IO modules. Again, the most common being the analog and the digital. And we want to use a repeater in between. I'm just going to walk you through the steps. This is going to be a little different than what's on the video because it's a little different network configuration. But at least it will give you some flexibility. And at the end of our session, I will follow up with an email that's got 2 exercises.